in my last video about the Remington 788 6mm that I picked up used at a local gun shop. We disassembled the rifle to verify that indeed it did have a Canjar set trigger in it. So I've decided that I'm going to remove it from this 6mm Remington, and I'm going to put it on my 222 Remington 788. So these triggers are held on by a cross pin and a tension screw. So the first thing to do is to get the tension screw loosened up. Put this in the gun vise gently, just enough to hold it, watching out for the safety button there. So I think I'll put another cloth under there to space that up a bit. Okay, there, that'll be good. That'll support it fine. So now we'll go just tighten this enough to get to it and then find a bit that fits the screw. Let's see, perhaps this is a relatively fat blade. Not too bad. I like it a little thicker. That's worse. Let's see what I have in this set that might be better. This one looks promising. I like how that fits. Try that one. Okay, now the tension is off the trigger. You see now that this is loose and pivoting on that cross pin that's hammered through. I'll take a little bit more off of this screw just to make sure that we're plenty loose. So the next thing to do will be to tap that screw out, or excuse me, tap the pin out, and it needs to come from this side. There is a hole in the safety that allows access with a roll pin punch. I think I have a punch that will work real well for that. See how that is for size. That's a little too large. So we'll go back to this other set. I think that will work fine. So again, we'll block the action up on the table to support the back side of the trigger before we start tapping on it. So I'll move on to setting that up. This wood block should provide good support for the trigger group. It's flat on the side other than a couple of, there's a circlip on our pin here and that, so I think we can support that trigger like that, and that will be good support on there. So now we just need to put something underneath the action to support it. We'll put a piece of felt up here, keep it from clanging around. Put a piece under here just to support it there. That looks like it's a little, we're hitting right now on this piece here, this L-shaped piece of steel that's screwed to the bottom of the receiver. It is the guide for the magazine, and that's kind of holding in the way here, so I need to find a way to support the trigger without getting into that. That looks much better. That way I'm supporting the trigger. The action's getting supported by that felt pad. The barrel's being supported down here. It looks like it's sitting nice and flat on that block where I can tap on that cross pin and knock it out. I do think I will clamp it down to the bench just to make sure nothing bounces. I've got a screw clamp. Won't quite reach where I'm set, so I'm going to slide it a little closer to the front of the table. Just slide the whole setup out about that far. I think that's going to work fine. Put a pad on here. I think I can still get at that roll pin. Let's clamp it up this way, and then that way I'll be out. There we go. Put the clamp over the top. That's good and firm. Now it has rolled up, so now I'm not getting enough support underneath this block, so I'll move my pads for support here. I'll put another one underneath the side of the scope up here. Under the scope ring will be good support. Now that looks like that will carry some load if I put it under the scope ring there. And that looks better. The main goal I'm after is to have the action be secure to the bench when I tap on the roll pin with a hammer. I don't want it to hop around, but now this is good and firm against the bench. It's, you know, I can tap on that pin and not harm anything. I'll pick a pin punch. I think the one that I had out of this set is the best bet. So let's tap that cross pin out. Try not to get my head in the camera. Oh, I don't even need to use a hammer. Once I took the tension off the screw, the pin pressed out freely. So that worked out well. No hammer required. So now that that's done, I should be able to slide the whole trigger assembly right off. It appears that the button on the safety is holding us up just a little bit, but that should either pop right off. I think those just have a little detent, but maybe I can just get the angle correct here. Let's be careful with this so that we don't break that plastic. I know that just presses on there. So it looks to me that the best thing to do here to make sure that I don't damage that plastic button that's on the safety is to remove the side plate. The safety mechanism here, the screwdriver bit is too wide. That one is close, but it's not going all the way down in, so let's try something a little different here. That feels pretty good. Okay, that's out. So now maybe I can move the safety around a little bit. It's still on the bolt release. Okay, there we are. Now the trigger's out. I'm going to go ahead and slip this screw back in just to make sure that we don't lose it. Okay, look at that. Okay, so there it is. The trigger has been removed. Here's the spring for the set part of the trigger. Goes right back on there like so, and then we can get it set up in the other rifle. Now here's the stock for the 6mm Remington 788 that I removed the Canjar trigger from. I don't know if any additional inletting was done to clear that trigger. I do know that for a Timney trigger in a 788 sometimes you have to clearance a little bit. The one thing that I have noticed about this setup is that this 788 being a later one, the floor plate simply sets on the surface of the bottom of the stock. It is not inlet. And then of course the trigger guard goes into the slot there and bolts down the two guard screws, come in and hold things in place. It appears that when the Canjar trigger was installed, it needed more clearance in this up and down dimension from the bottom of the receiver tube to the outside of the floor plate. And it appears that two things were done. It appears that there was some material removed here, some crude inletting. They didn't really pay a lot of attention to what they were doing. And it also appears that there was a little bit of clearance made on the lower part of the trigger, and maybe a little bit to clear the trigger guard here. I can dress those things up and everything will be just fine. I have read that it's a tight fit to get these in. That model of the Canjar trigger can fit on a variety of different Remington's bolt action rifles. I don't remember them all. Now this one is etched 788-2, which I would assume that the people at Canjar sold this one specifically to be a 788 trigger. I have heard where others have been made to fit. I haven't found a lot of details as to what they had to do to make them fit, but perhaps getting this dimension from the bottom of the receiver tube to the outside of the stock correct and make enough clearance on the top side of the trigger shoe is what they had to do. That seems to be what's happened here. I think, I'll have to look, I think that my 222 788, it does have a nicer stock. It has I believe it's actually walnut rather than this later hardwood stock. I think that it has the inlet floor plate, so there shouldn't be, hopefully, as much of a clearance issue to install the trigger in it. But what I figure I'll do is put this rifle back together, just put it away for now. I may end up using the firing pin out of it in my 308 788, because the 308 that I have, someone had done a kitchen gunsmith trigger job on it that was very dangerous, and that was what led me to put a Timney trigger in the 308 788. So I may use this firing pin in my 308 788 until I stumble across another good used one. I don't plan on shooting the 6mm right away. I very well may. If I do, I will certainly have to put a different trigger in this rifle. The one factory trigger that I have from my 788 is just not a safe trigger. I have collected a few other parts where I could perhaps find another factory trigger in my pile of spares that would be appropriate for this rifle. But for now, I'm planning on just putting it away and moving on with the 222. So I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this rifle. It's reverse of the disassembly, so I won't show it on the video. Of course, it'll go back together without a trigger because the trigger is going to be used in the other rifle.